Welcome to Learn the Sword. Shinkens, as discussed earlier, are very important because basically that's what swording is about, having a sharp sword on a target. As a general rule though, how do we get from the fear of the blade in the back of our head to the point where we can easily pull the sword where it doesn't really matter and you don't have the fear of getting cut? And that's probably one of the biggest factors. When you watch Iaido or someone practicing with an Iaito, or if you watch any of the videos or even some of the samurai geki, the Jidai geki, like their spaghetti westerns where the actors are pulling the swords in and out of their swords or in and out of the sheaths, or you see any of that, well, there's lots of different ways to work it, of course, but it's all fear of the blade, because when they start pulling out the sword, you can see my fingers. You can't see the koiguchi. You can't see that big gaping hole like this. And the reason why is because my fingers are protecting that, so I can sit there and I can pull the blade out. My fingers are running across the blade, and when it comes out, it doesn't really hit the sides of the wall of the saya. So it keeps it centered a little bit more. There's a difficulty with this. When I put the sword away, you can see right here that my fingers are right on the blade. I mean, they are right on the blade this way. So if I'm pulling it in, if I'm bringing it out this way, you can see that it doesn't really matter, but if I do make a mistake, there's not that much room for error, is there? So when you're dealing or watching with other people who are using the sword and they're proficient too, but when they're pulling out the sword, their hands are down here, or they're pulling out the sword, their hands are here, or their hands are fluttering around or whatever, just know that they are still scared of getting cut by the blade. But over time and lots of practice, you're able to take your hand and work it in really well like this. Now, don't over oil the blade, because if you do, your whole hand will become a little oily and then it'll start sweating. So do this, sort of wipe off your hand a little bit. You'll find out that this might be a little too oily for you, just because depending on what part of the country. So me, I'm not gonna get a rag because I'm at my own dojo right now and I just came up there and did that. So now it's not as oily feeling, because sometimes that happens. So with that aspect, let's draw the sword. Just follow along, let's take our time. Just take the sword, pull it in and pull it out, especially if you have a Shinken. Just pull it out and bring it in at this speed. Now remember, if your fingers aren't used to it, go back to my explanation on how to work with the weapon. Remember, you had a 2-finger guide, then a 1-finger guide, then your C guide, and then eventually your fingers went over the koiguchi as a facade, and therefore, bring it up this way. But what I want us to do is I want us to start pulling out the sword. So let's practice reverse. Bring it around this way. Bring it in. Cut. Reverse it around. We can become very theatrical with this. Let's try that again. Pull it out. Reverse. Bring it to here. Let it come out to your fingers. Let it drop. Pull up. Hold it into a hostile position. Go ahead and make your cut down. And then reverse your hand. Grab it on this side, bring it around like that, and bring it right back into the koiguchi. So little things like this will start teaching you how to use more dexterity on putting away the sword, so later when you do something just basic and simple, it will just feel much more basic and simple. So I'm sitting there doing this now. So just as I'm talking a tad, just pull out your swords and start spinning them around like this, maybe this way. Now, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull out here to here, and I'm going to cut down like this. And then I bring the sword back. Or I can take the sword, see where it falls about right here, where my fingers are? See that? Oh, it just fell down. It drops to there, pull it back, and cut in this way. So as you see that, I really can't do anything with a sword until it's drawn out of the sheath. Because if I try to do a technique like this, if I try to turn around and I try to cut and turn, it's starting to grind into the sheath too much. So remember, get it out of the sheath and then make the cut at this time in your training to make sure that your weapon stays good, doesn't dull out. Make sure your saya stays good, because you know they cost a lot of money after one gets all worn out. So, ready? And out, and then bring it in. See how that works? Now let's do a reverse. Out, cut, reverse this way, bring it in. Simple enough. We'll go out there and we'll get to here, and then all of a sudden I'll let the sword drop, and look at the angle it came to. Now it can cut up. So if we're doing kata 1, for example, I just pull it out to here, have a little angle, it drops a tad, falls into place, doesn't it? And that little falling in place gets the speed started. Sort of like getting up on top of what do you call that? One of those roller coasters right at the top, and then you start coming down. So it gets to here, it drops down, and then it can continue up. So remember, when you just adjust your hips, adjust the blade to your hips, and just pull it out smoothly and let gravity start some of the cut, and then do a little shiborian with it, that really, really makes a difference. And a lot of times you use a Shinken, and it has no fear of the blade. And you go, well, it just takes time. For example, if I come over here and I grab this piece of paper, we can see that this was a fairly sharp sword. It cuts pretty well.